Chapter 94. Cindy was in anguish, with tears streaming uncontrollably down her cheeks. She was supposed to have a bright future, but her greed caused her to be taken advantage of, then fired from her company. She was truly at rock bottom. Yet, she had done all of that to herself. The fault was hers alone. Wilbur got to his feet and said to Nancy, "You stay and comfort her first. I'll be on my way." Nancy nodded silently, knowing that the lunch was over. It would be awkward if Wilbur stayed any longer. That was the only thing he could do. Wilbur glanced at Cindy and sighed. He then went to the counter and paid the bill before leaving. Wilbur could still feel his heart aching over the bill on his way home. $18,000. He had never been that lavish with his money before. Just as Wilbur was agonizing over that, he brought his car to a stop over the bridge. The car in front of him came to a complete stop. There seemed to be a traffic jam. All Wilbur could do was wait in the car, bored out of his mind. Not long after that, a cry and the sound of someone running could be heard coming from the front. Confused, Wilbur got out of the car to have a look. He walked for a little over 10 meters and saw a man in his 30s standing in the middle of the bridge. He was wielding a sharp knife, waving it around wildly as he cursed and shouted like a madman. The people in the cars around were scared out of their wits, causing them to get out of their cars and run for their lives. Wilbur frowned. The man continued to thrash about wildly, shouting crazily, "Give me back my money! Give me back my company! You bastard! I'll kill you!" The man's eyes were bloodshot, and he seemed to have completely lost his mind as he was oblivious to the people around him. Just then, the men spotted a couple with a child in the midst of their escape and charged toward them at once. The sight made several people in the crowd scream. It was dangerous to run into a psycho like this. Just then, Wilbur ran up in front of the man to cut him off and shouted, "Stop it!" The shout seemed to have struck the man like lightning, rendering him motionless for a while. The family took the opportunity to flee, disappearing into the crowd. The man quickly returned to his feral state the next second, charging toward Wilbur as he shouted that he wanted his money and company back. At the same time, police sirens rang through the air. Several officers got out of the car, walking towards the men with their guns drawn as they shouted at him to surrender. Wilbur frowned at that. The men grabbed Wilbur, putting the knife to Wilbur's neck, and shouted, "None of you come any closer, or I'll kill him." The officers saw that and did not dare to act recklessly. They stopped in their tracks and stared at the men intently. "Back off! Back off!" the man shouted wildly. The officers retreated slowly, gesturing for the crowd to do the same. Just then, Wilbur raised his hands calmly and said, "Dude, don't do this. You've still got a life ahead of you. Don't screw your future over more than you already have." The man shouted, "Shut up. They scammed me of my money and my company, and now they want me dead. I'll kill them." Wilbur shook his head. "Well, do that then. What are you doing here, threatening innocent civilians?" That made the man burst into tears. "I know I'm no match for them, but it's so unfair. It's so unfair to me."